Before you start, check the time. Just keep that in mind because you might not be awake long enough to see the end of this video. I made this for you, yes you, wherever you are, whatever you're carrying tonight. So if this calms you down a little, tap the like button before your eyes get heavy, subscribe, and this quiet place will just be here whenever you need it. Tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, turn on a soft fan, and settle in. You're going to bed tonight in 1325. The floor is wet, your bed is made of straw, and the breakfast bell outside isn't ringing. Let's get started. Waking before dawn to the sound of a distant church bell. The stone walls breathe cold against the skin. It is early, far earlier than the body desires, but the bell insists with a tone that is neither urgent nor kind. It tolls from somewhere across the courtyard, echoing through corridors and open rafters, its notes flat and regular like the hands of an old clock. The scribe's eyes open slowly, not with curiosity but from habit, woken more by repetition than any sense of purpose. He lies beneath a single wool blanket, stiff and heavy with years of use. The cot beneath him creaks slightly as he shifts. His knees ache with the familiar dullness of a morning not yet warmed by motion. Around him the dormitory is still quiet. Others stir in slow sequence. No one speaks. Speech is reserved for later when the tongue has remembered its duties. The air smells faintly of ink, wax, and old garments. His robes, folded and placed neatly on a wooden stool, hold the subtle perfume of the scriptorium, dusty parchment, dried glue, and the ghost of candle smoke. Dressing is a silent process. Woolen hose, tunic, thin belt, the robe last, layered against the dampness that clings to the cloister walls. By the time he ties his sandals, simple leather, well worn, the second bell is already tolling. He nods to the monk at the doorway, who returns the gesture without looking up. This is how each day begins, indistinguishable from the one before. No alarm clock, no sunrise ritual, just the slow gray light of dawn and the mechanical rhythm of a life copied daily like a familiar script on coarse vellum. He walks the corridor to the scriptorium with slow, practiced steps. The corridor is lined with rough stones, the same ones he has passed since youth. There is no decoration, no distractions, a place built for endurance. His shoulders are slightly rounded, not from age but from years of leaning toward the page. Outside the frost has not yet lifted. Inside the day prepares to unfold, not in events but in letters, one by one. And now, seated before his work table, he prepares to begin the first of many identical days, with no audience but the dust, and no urgency but time. The scribe rises, not with urgency, but in a manner befitting the rhythm of stone and breath. The bench where he sat to lace his sandals still bears the faint imprint of his weight. His robes, gathered and belted at the waist, shift with the weight of habit. The stone wall beside him, gray, pitted, and patient, stands as it has for centuries, unmoved by the daily lives that pass alongside it. He faces it now, not as something to be admired, but as a surface of simple support. One hand, knotted at the knuckles from years of quill work, reaches forward. It meets the wall with the slow assurance of someone who knows precisely where the chill will bite. The stone is cold, not sharply so, but with a dull and settled frost, the kind that seeps through fabric and lingers. His palm rests there a moment longer than necessary, absorbing that quiet temperature, aligning breath with stillness. His other arm lifts slowly, deliberately across his body. The shoulder protests, not loudly, but with a muted creak like old hinges on a modest wooden gate. There is no rush. Each stretch is measured, not for flexibility or strength, but for continuity. The elbow straightens, the fingers extend, not far, not fully, just enough to recall that they still can. His neck turns slightly. The vertebrae shift with a faint click. The sensation is neither painful nor pleasant, merely informative, a reminder that the body, like parchment, requires warming before use. He draws in a long breath through the nose, then lets it pass slowly from his mouth, as if exhaling a thought not yet formed. Another arm lifts, another quiet rotation of the shoulder, like the winding of a slow and silent clock. The cold from the wall transfers itself to his robe, to the woolen sleeves that cover his forearms. The cloth absorbs it without comment. It is not discomfort, it is atmosphere, familiar, steady, necessary. There is no vigor in the stretch, no burst of energy, just a slight adjustment of posture, a preparing of limbs for the hours of stillness to come. The scribe does not smile, nor does he sigh. He simply lowers his arms, rolls one wrist, then the other, and places both hands quietly against the folds of his robe. He is ready, or at least, no less ready than the morning allowed, and the wall, indifferent and unmoved, remains unchanged, unnoticed, as it has through hundreds of such mornings before. Lighting a small oil lamp with difficulty, the room is dim, not dark, no, not entirely, but shadowed in that hesitant pre-dawn shade where outlines are softened and corners dissolve into gray. The scribe stands beside the modest wooden table where his tools await, each one arranged with the predictability of long habit. The ink pot sits covered, its lid crusted faintly from yesterday's work. The quill rests beside it, trimmed carefully, waiting in silence. But the room remains too dim for letters, and so the day cannot begin, not yet. From beneath the table's edge he draws forth the lamp. It is small, earthenware, simple, no ornament, a rounded belly of fired clay with a single spout extending like the nose of some patient animal. He turns it slowly in his hands, inspecting the wick. The twine is stiff, blackened at the tip, frayed at one end. He trims it, not expertly, but adequately, with a short iron knife, wiping the blade on the cloth of his robe. The oil is kept in a narrow-necked jar, sealed with a cork that sticks just slightly as he removes it. The oil is thick, derived from pressed nuts or olives, with a faint scent of dust and resin. He pours, slowly, with great care, into the mouth of the lamp. The surface of the oil catches the light that is barely there, a ripple, a glint. Then stillness. Lighting it is the next task. A small flint, a worn strip of steel, and patience. He strikes once. A spark, weak and quick, dies before it lands. Again, the metal rings faintly as it touches the stone. A spark jumps, misses the wick. He does not sigh, he merely adjusts his hand, leans closer and strikes once more. This time a spark lands and lingers. The wick catches, slowly, hesitantly. A thread of smoke rises, then a whisper of flame. It flickers, uncertain, then steadies. He waits, watching it. The light is not bright, it does not fill the room, but it gives shape to the edge of the desk, casts a faint glow on the nearby shelf, reveals the faint curve of his inkhorn. He leans back slightly, observes the flame as it settles into itself. Small, steady, adequate. The lamp is placed on a flat stone tile to prevent heat from touching wood. He adjusts the wick gently with the tip of his knife, drawing it slightly forward until the flame elongates, then withdraws it again, finding that perfect middle point between smoke and sputter. Only now does the day begin. Only now, in this faint amber glow, does the page appear real. Before this moment the world was shadow and stone. Now it is work, and the flame, barely taller than a thumb, begins its slow, unspectacular task, keeping time by its own slow consumption, unnoticed, unpraised, and yet entirely necessary. Mixing ink from oak galls and iron salt. With the lamp now lit, casting its low and steady flicker over the wooden surface of the writing desk, the scribe turns to the task that must precede all others. The ink must be readied, not purchased, not uncorked from a ready bottle. No, it must be mixed, measured, stirred, allowed to rest. As always, he retrieves the small wooden box from the corner of the shelf. Its lid creaks as it opens, not from neglect, but from use. Too many damp mornings, too much dust. Inside, a handful of shriveled, hard-balled nodules, each one the color of old walnuts, each one formed on the underside of oak leaves by the sting of a gall wasp, oak galls, known to him as the very marrow of good ink. He selects 3, not too small, not split. He taps each one gently on the table, not to test them but simply as part of the rhythm. He places them in a small mortar stone, unpolished, worn into a shallow bowl with a pestle that fits his hand, not because it was shaped for it, but because his hand has shaped itself to fit. Crushing is slow work, not violent. The pestle turns in small circles. The gall fragments break down with quiet resistance, releasing their tannins, brown, bitter, and smelling faintly of dry earth and decay. The sound is muted, soft crack, gentle grind, dust shifting like old paper. There is no hurry. The ink must last. It must not run thin. A hasty mixture today becomes a wasted page tomorrow. When the powder is fine enough, coarse as flour, dark as dried herbs, he adds water, slowly from a small clay pitcher, a trickle, then stillness. He stirs it with a thin stick, one end carved flat. The mixture darkens, but it is not yet ink, it is only tannin. Now the salt, iron sulfate, vitriol as it is called, kept wrapped in waxed cloth in a second, smaller box, separate from the galls. This mineral, ground fine and sharp, gives the ink its permanence, its depth. It will bind with the tannins. It will blacken over time, deepen with exposure to air. He measures it not with a spoon, but with his fingers, just a pinch, no more. He drops it in. The water hisses faintly, though no steam rises. A reaction begins, chemical, slow, invisible at first. The mixture turns a darker brown, then purple, then almost black, the shade of smoke. The scent now sharper, a little like vinegar, a little like rust. He stirs, slowly, carefully. The ink thickens. He lifts the stir stick, watches a single drop fall. It lands with a soft plop in the center of a sheet of rough parchment laid aside for testing. He waits, watches it dry. The color darkens as it rests. Good, not too thin, not too light, not gritty. He pours the ink carefully into a horn cup, fitted with a lid. He seals it and sets it on the table's corner. The rest, the unused powder, the spare galls, the mineral flakes, are returned to their places. The box is closed, the pestle wiped clean, everything in order. It is ready. He is ready. The words may begin now, though they will not hurry. The ink will flow as the quill permits it, one letter at a time, and as it dries it will darken, slowly, like thought, like memory. Adjusting the wooden writing desk for the 100th time, the scribe stands before the writing desk, a familiar object in every sense but still subject to minor necessary adjustments. It is not a grand piece of furniture. There is no ornament, no carving, no gleam of polish, just wood, plain, uneven, and faintly warped by years of exposure to damp stone and shifting weight. It leans slightly forward, angled for the task of copying, not comfort. The surface bears the faint traces of ink spills long since scrubbed and sanded, and yet never fully erased. A shallow groove runs along the top edge, worn there by his own hand resting, again and again in the same place. Today, as on many days before, the angle feels wrong, not dramatically, just enough that the wrist bends poorly, or the light falls uneven across the page. He sighs, not aloud but within, and moves to adjust it. First he stoops to the side. The wedge of wood beneath the front leg has slipped, half an inch perhaps. He lifts the desk slightly, slowly, carefully, his back protesting with a stiffness earned not through labor, but through decades of stillness. The wedge is retrieved, inspected, turned over, replaced with the thinner edge inward. The desk is lowered again, a small creak, a slight shift, still not quite right. Next he examines the left foot, where the flagstone beneath has always dipped a little more than it ought to. A folded scrap of parchment, too torn for writing, too good for waste, is inserted beneath. Not a solution, merely a quiet negotiation between man and stone. He straightens, looks at the surface. No change is apparent to the eye, no dramatic leveling or sudden improvement, but his body knows. His shoulders settle differently, his forearms rest more evenly, The quill, when placed at the center, no longer rolls away of its own volition. He places the inkhorn at the upper right corner, just so, the knife beside it. The test sheet is nudged gently to the side, its edge aligned with the grain of the wood. A cloth dampened slightly to catch spills is folded once more and set within reach. He sits and waits. Just a moment. The desk does not respond. It is only wood, but it holds its silence differently now. Less resistant, more accommodating. Not cooperative. No, that would suggest progress, but manageable. It is at last a surface fit for the day's labors. The adjustment minor, the ritual familiar, the result imperceptibly improved. And so he lifts the quill, gently, as though to thank the desk for enduring the same conversation yet again. Selecting a blank sheet of vellum with great care, the stack of vellum rests on a low shelf beneath the writing surface, housed in a wooden tray whose corners are stained dark from long faded ink, candle soot, and handling by hands as dry as the leaves themselves. The sheets are not many, vellum is not plentiful, and each one represents not only material but time, a lifetime perhaps, if one traces the origin back far enough. The scribe reaches slowly, sliding the tray forward with both hands, lest any sheet catch at the edge and fold. He peers down into the neat pile. They are not uniform. Some are broader, others narrower. A few curl faintly at the corners, reacting to moisture remembered from days long past. Their hue is not white, but the soft, inconsistent tones of aged cream, pale ochre, and the faint blush of old handling, each one like a winter sky before dawn. He begins with the topmost, lifting it by two corners. He angles it toward the light of the oil lamp, its flicker giving gentle motion to the slight imperfections within the skin. The surface is examined slowly. First the flesh side, smoother, subtly reflective, then the hair side with its faint texture like a whisper of stubble left behind. His fingertips, calloused but sensitive in their own way, slide gently across it, testing for inconsistencies, bumps, scars, or any resistance that might catch a quill. There is a small crease along the lower edge. He frowns, not with displeasure, but with acknowledgement. This one perhaps for notes, or indexing. He sets it aside. The next sheet is flatter, thicker, a fine specimen. The pores are scarcely visible, the surface free of blemish, save for a single freckle of brown toward the margin, a mark that need not be corrected, merely accounted for. He holds it up to the light again. The sheet has integrity. It does not sag. It does not ripple. A good sheet. Still, he places it to one side. It is too fine. Best kept for decorative work. Illuminated initials, a copy of importance, not today's task. The third sheet is quieter. It has the feel of reliability, modestly smooth but not showy, pale but not translucent. It yields slightly when held, without feeling weak. The edges are clean, the corners squared, not sharply, but enough to align against the desk. This, then, is the day's page. Not ideal, not flawed, simply appropriate. He sets it down with both hands, aligns its bottom edge to the front of the desk, leaving 2 finger widths from the lip. His left hand flattens it, palm down, while his right retrieves a small weight, rounded iron, wrapped in cloth to anchor the top corner. The sheet does not resist. It accepts its place. The selection is complete. No one sees this decision. No one remarks upon it. But the scribe knows. An unsuitable sheet leads to waste. A too fine one invites hesitation. This one, balanced and obedient, will do exactly as it should. Accept the words, dry the ink and curl no more than it must, and with the page chosen, the day may at last begin, one quiet letter at a time, measuring margins, using a string and small bone tool. The chosen sheet of vellum lies flat beneath the soft light of the oil lamp. It does not flutter, it does not curl, it waits as a field waits for the first furrow. But before ink may touch it, before even a single letter can be formed, it must be ordered, its space must be understood, its boundaries gently but firmly imposed. The scribe reaches to the narrow drawer beneath the desk, and from it retrieves 2 simple objects. One is a length of string, no longer than a hand and forearm together, frayed at both ends, lightly stained in places where it once pressed against still wet ink. The other is a slender tool made from bone, smoothed by use, flattened along one edge, and worn to a quiet polish from years of slow scraping. He begins at the top. The string is placed across the width of the page. No ruler is consulted. The string knows it has been cut to the correct proportion for margin spacing, measured years ago from a manuscript copied before this monk had gray in his beard. He holds one end steady at the left, draws it tight across the page to the right, and marks the beginning of the text column by pressing the bone tool gently against the vellum, not to cut, not to draw, but to score. A faint groove appears, no more than a whisper in the parchment. It catches the light if angled correctly, and disappears entirely if not. He repeats this at the bottom of the page, adjusting the placement so that both margins will guide the eye but not distract it. Then again along the vertical edges, creating the invisible frame that will contain the day's labor. He moves methodically, each line measured not with haste but with memory. The string folds easily in his palm, reused for horizontal and vertical alike. He does not speak, he does not hum. The only sound is the soft pressure of bone against skin, and skin against skin. Once the frame is complete, he checks each line again by eye, not to confirm its accuracy mathematically, but to ensure it feels right, that the lines fall where they should, that the shape of the text block will rest comfortably in the center, without drifting too close to edge or spine. A balanced page is a legible page. A legible page is a faithful one. Satisfied, he sets the bone tool aside. The string is coiled once more and returned to the drawer. The page remains unchanged in appearance to the untrained eye, but now it has order, invisible structure, boundaries drawn not with ink but with knowledge, a quiet discipline beneath the surface. He exhales softly and brushes a single speck of dust from the margin. The sheet is ready. Soon the letters will follow. Scraping a small error off the parchment, the text has begun. A quiet procession of letters marches down the page, dark, tidy, unadorned. The ink, still damp in the upper corners, has begun to settle into the fibers of the vellum. Each line rests in the margin so carefully measured. Each word follows the next with the slow inevitability of a wheel turning, and then a mistake. It is small, barely more than a stroke, one loop too many, a tail drawn too far, a breath's hesitation in the wrong direction, but the scribe sees it. Instantly, before the ink has even dried, he freezes. No cry of frustration escapes him. There is no sigh, no muttered oath, only stillness. The quill is lifted and set gently to rest. He reaches to the far side of the desk where among the tools of quiet repair rests a knife. Not the broader one used to trim parchment or split quills, a smaller blade, short, fine, as narrow as a thought. He brings it to the page. The error, a misformed letter, perhaps a redundant loop in a minuscule E, lies near the center of a sentence. The surrounding text is unspoiled, still wet enough that a tremor of the hand would ruin more than it corrects. He steadies his wrist on the wooden rest just beneath the desk's edge. Then, with the tip of the knife, he begins to scrape. The motion is slow, circular, barely more than pressure. The goal is not to gouge or flake, but to lift the ink from the surface before it sinks too deeply. The knife arcs back and forth, gently like a whisper over dry grass. Flakes of pigment rise and fall away, tiny, black, barely visible. He pauses after each pass to assess. The vellum fibers must not be broken, too much pressure, and the surface becomes ragged, unsalvageable. He knows this well. There are margins in another manuscript, weeks old, that bear the scars of a younger hand too eager to erase. The final traces fade. He leans back. The spot is bare, slightly roughened, but not torn. The error is gone. No longer a word, not even a letter, just absence. He reaches for a small stone, a burnisher, rounded, smooth as river glass, and presses it gently against the scraped area, rubbing in slow, tight circles. This will smooth the fibers, flatten them, make them ink-ready once more. When he lifts the stone, the page appears whole again, the error invisible unless sought. the correction unseen by any future reader. Only he will remember. He rewrites the letter, this time correctly, and allows the line to continue. No praise is given, no mark is made. It is not a triumph, it is maintenance, the quiet preservation of order, and that, in the scribe's world, is victory enough. Copying the first letter with slow precision. The page is ready, the margins are set, the ink stirred and still waits in its horn cup. The quill, trimmed earlier and tested on scrap, rests between the scribe's fingers, held not tightly but with the practiced steadiness of one who has written thousands of letters, none of which bore his name. The vellum receives his gaze without expression. The space at the top left corner, empty now, represents not possibility but protocol. There is no question what letter will come first. It has been copied before. It has always begun this way. The shape is known, the form is inevitable. Still, the first letter must be perfect. He lowers the quill slowly, aligning it at a precise angle. The point meets the surface. The ink, drawn by gravity and capillary desire, begins its descent, and then contact. A downward stroke, slight pressure. The ink flows in a thin, deliberate line, then a curve, a flourish, modest, not decorative, but firm. The nib is turned slightly between his fingers to widen the stroke, then drawn upward in a narrow taper. The letter forms beneath his hand, not swiftly, not effortlessly, but with intention. Every motion is slowed by caution, steadied by repetition. The shape emerges, a capital, a familiar initial, possibly an I or a B, bold in proportion, dark where the ink pools at its thickest points. The letter is neither ornate nor spare. It does not invite admiration, it merely begins. He pauses, not for applause, not for reflection, but to observe. The letter holds. The ink does not run. The lines are clean. He watches a moment longer to ensure it dries without distortion. The ambient warmth of the oil lamp and the dryness of the vellum assist in this silent process. He lifts the quill away. The first letter now sits alone on the page, anchored, absolute. It is not celebrated. There is no marker to distinguish it from the 1,000 other first letters he has written, but it has been done, and that is what matters. It is the beginning of a line, of a paragraph, of a manuscript that may take weeks to complete and months to dry. But now, finally, it has started, and so he breathes, softly, silently, and prepares to write the second letter, which will take no less care than the first. Repeating the Lord's name exactly as before, the line advances, one word at a time, each letter formed with care, each space measured not by aesthetic judgment, but by the quiet standards of legibility. The scribe does not rush. There is no reward for speed, only risk. Now the Lord's name appears again. He does not pause. He does not need to refer to the exemplar beside him. This word, this name, has passed through his hands more than any other. It recurs across lines and chapters, prayers and psalms. Each time it appears, it must be written the same way, exactly the same. Any variation, however slight, draws attention, disturbs the rhythm, diminishes the reverence encoded in its consistency. His fingers adjust the quill angle instinctively. The letter D comes first and is rendered slightly larger, not as decoration but from long practice. The rest follows, ominous, carefully spaced, carefully formed. The O rounded but narrow, the M low and steady, the N rising cleanly, not leaning forward as it did once, years ago before he corrected that habit. The ink is sufficient, not thick, not dry, it flows smoothly. The lines within each letter remain firm. He does not look at the word as a whole while he writes it. He watches each stroke in isolation, trusting that together they will echo the forms already written. When it is complete, he examines the word, briefly, but with focus. It matches the one before. He knows because he has written this name already, 6 times this week, 12 times in the last section alone, perhaps hundreds of times across this manuscript, perhaps thousands across his life. He cannot say. He does not count. but the shape is embedded in him. Some scribes draw a small cross before the name. Some use red ink. Here that is not the custom. Here reverence lies in uniformity, in the silent discipline of sameness. He moves to the next word. The Lord's name will appear again soon, perhaps before the line ends. When it does, he will write it the same way, not with fresh inspiration, not with creative impulse, but with the quiet fidelity of someone who understands that sacredness lies in repetition, not variety, but sameness. Dipping the quill carefully to avoid blotting, the line is half complete. The words lie clean and orderly across the vellum, their edges firm, their spacing even, but the ink in the nib is fading. The strokes grow thinner, fainter. The last S shows hesitation in its lower loop. It is time. The scribe halts, not abruptly, but with the gentle finality of someone finishing a thought. He lifts the quill from the page, turning it slowly between finger and thumb to observe the tip. The slit of the nib no longer shines, the edge is dry. He moves his hand to the right, where the inkhorn waits, its mouth narrow, dark, rimmed with the faint crust of previous days. The ink inside is still, its surface dull, carrying the faint scent of iron and the memory of crushed oak galls. Dipping is not an idle gesture. It is careful, measured. The quill enters the ink at a slight angle, never vertically, lest the tip flood or break. He lowers it slowly, letting only the first third of the nib touch the surface. Then he lifts it again, equally slowly, allowing excess ink to draw back down into the horn by gravity alone. He does not shake it. Instead, he brings it over to the scrap sheet resting beside his work, a square of discarded vellum. On it, he draws a single line, then a second. The ink flows now, steady, even, no blot forms. The nib has taken just enough. He glances again at the working page. No drop must fall there without command. Returning to his place in the text, he lowers the quill again, poised, balanced. The next letter begins. A blot, if it were to occur, would not merely stain the page, it would halt the work, force scraping, correction, delay. Each dip then is a small act of judgment, of restraint. It is not dramatic, it is not praised, but it is necessary. And so he dips again, as he will hundreds more times before the page is done, quietly, cautiously, and always with the same care, blowing gently on fresh ink for drying. The line is complete. Each letter stands in place, dark and defined. The ink, though skillfully applied, remains wet. The scribe knows this without touching. He sees it in the way the strokes catch the light, those faint glistening edges curved like still water before a breeze. To move forward now would be to risk smudging, dragging a sleeve or the side of the hand through a day's work, so he pauses and exhales, not sharply, not with effort, a soft, sustained stream of breath, directed across the line. The movement is barely visible, only the tiny tremble of a parchment edge, or a faint flicker in the lamp's glow marks that anything is happening at all. The ink stirs, not by force but by patience. Drying is not an instant, it is a process. The breath cools it, helps it settle, speeds, marginally, its transformation from wet to fixed. He leans closer but not too close. One must never speak over the work. Saliva is more destructive than time. He watches, blows again, waits. Some scribes use sand, others fine dust, sprinkled lightly then shaken away. But here, in this monastery, the breath is preferred, less intrusive, more controlled. There is dignity in it, a small act of care that leaves no trace. The ink darkens slightly as it dries. It becomes matte, firmer, less vulnerable. Only when the last glint of moisture has gone does he continue. The next line awaits. The quill hovers above the vellum, ink freshly dipped, his body leaning slightly forward in anticipation. But that gentle moment of exhalation, of pausing simply to breathe across his work, remains part of the process, as necessary as the letter itself, as unnoticed as the hours that pass. And now he begins again, rewriting the same sentence from the day before. The morning progresses slowly. The lines build, word by word, quiet as the turning of leaves in still air. But then his hand stops. The sentence before him, half-written, looks familiar. Not in the way all lines of scripture seem familiar after years of copying. No, this one, exactly familiar. He furrows his brow, minutely. Emotion is not encouraged here, but recognition stirs in silence. He draws his eyes back to the previous page, turns it, reads the last line written before yesterday's light had faded, and there it is, the same sentence, word for word, punctuation placed in the same careful rhythm, the same verse, the same structure, the same slow conclusion marked by a final period centered neatly in the line. He has begun to copy what was already complete. The realization is neither dramatic nor despairing. There is no gasp, no curse, just the faintest shifting of breath, an error but not uncommon. In repetition, the mind forgets which line was last recorded, which was still in thought. It is one of the reasons scribes mark their place at day's end with a small mark, one he neglected to make yesterday, perhaps distracted by the fading lamp or a cough. He stares at the sentence. His inked version, half-formed, stands a few words short of completion. The decision must be made. He will not leave both. That would confuse. To cross out the second, inelegant. To scrape it, possible, but time-consuming, and the surface has already begun to absorb the ink. Instead, he chooses to continue. He will finish the repetition. Let the sentence appear twice. A duplication, yes, but not a corruption. In sacred texts, clarity and completeness are more important than perfect brevity. Marginal notes can be added. A small line, drawn to mark it as intentional, or at least preserved with intent. He lowers his quill and resumes. The words are written again. The same curves, the same spacing, not identical in shape, no two letters ever are, but matched in rhythm. His hand, guided more by memory than reference, completes the sentence a second time. It is not satisfying, but it is stable, reliable. Better a sentence twice than one missing. Once finished, he places a faint mark in the margin, nothing more than a slash, quietly noting the duplication. For any who might someday read this page and wonder if he slept through his copying, which in a way he might have, but the error is not failure. It is part of the work. Copying is not invention, it is labor, and labor includes return, redundancy, even tedium. He breathes, moves on. The next line begins, pausing to check the original text for spelling. The quill hovers above the vellum. A word half complete trails behind it. The scribe's brow lowers not in frustration but in calculation. The sentence continues in his mind, familiar in rhythm, familiar in structure. Yet a particular word resists certainty, not an unfamiliar word. He has written it before, many times perhaps, but now in this instance a letter troubles him. Was it A-E or E alone, one R or two? He cannot proceed in confidence without checking, so he stops. The quill is set carefully in the groove carved into the edge of the writing desk, made precisely for this purpose. He leans back, not fully, just enough to stretch the curve of his neck, and turns his eyes to the exemplar, the source text from which he is copying. It rests to the left, angled upward on a small book cradle fashioned from plain wood and softened by folded cloth. The manuscript is old. The ink is brown with time. The script is tighter than his own, slightly more cramped, slightly more hurried, though no less careful. His eyes scan the lines. He knows the general region. The sentence is familiar. He begins at the margin, reading silently. Down a few lines, a pause, then back again. The word eludes him for a moment, not because it is hidden, but because its appearance is disguised by the hand of a different scribe, one who formed his letters slightly differently, who made his E lean backward and his R slope in a way that invites misreading. He finds it, there, near the middle of the line, spelled with two vowels, an A followed by an E, not the simplified form he nearly wrote, a minor distinction, but not meaningless. precision matters. Even if the meaning would survive, the trust in the manuscript would not. He reads the word again, once more to be certain. His lips move slightly, not to speak it, but to weigh its sound against its form. He marks its shape in memory, and then turns back to his own page. The ink on his quill has dried. He dips again, carefully, lightly, and returns to the half-formed word. He completes it now, with the correct spelling, with care not only in form, but in fidelity. This moment, this small pause, this quiet rechecking is not deviation from the work, it is the work. A scribe does not merely copy shapes, he transmits trust. One word spelled correctly ensures that the next reader, the next scribe, the next voice who chants these lines aloud, inherits not only the text but the intention behind it. He breathes, adjusts his position, and continues. The next word comes easily. Noticing a tiny pinhole in the parchment, the work proceeds. Letters flow across the vellum in orderly fashion, each line anchoring itself to the one before it. The ink is smooth today, neither thin nor stubborn, and the quill, recently trimmed, glides with dependable friction, and then, mid-word, something shifts. The nib catches slightly, not a full tear, not a spill, just the faintest stutter in the stroke. The line of ink curves slightly too wide, hesitates, then resumes. To the untrained eye it might pass unnoticed, but the scribe feels it instantly. He lifts the quill, leans forward, his eyes scan the place where the tip faltered. A dot, small, nearly invisible, sits in the path of the script. A pinhole, so small it did not show itself when the margins were measured, when the lines were ruled, or even when the page was first chosen. And yet here it is, a flaw, natural, minor, but still present. Formed long ago, perhaps during the stretching of the hide, or in the scraping of its surface. Not intentional, not avoidable, simply there. He studies it. It is not large enough to cause a tear. The fibers are still tight around its edges. No light passes through it from below, only a slight depression, a subtle thinning of the material, barely enough to accommodate the tip of a needle, but it changes the work. The quill cannot pass over it again in the same way. The next stroke must accommodate it. The letter, already compromised, will need to be adjusted, not reformed entirely, but modified ever so slightly to conceal the gap, perhaps a wider loop, perhaps a flourish, justified later by a note that the style was drawn from a regional scriptorium, or perhaps no adjustment at all. He considers. Too much correction invites suspicion, too little, and the ink may seep into the hole, feathering, staining. He touches the spot lightly with the corner of a linen cloth. There is no damage, no swelling. That is good. He lifts his small burnishing stone and smooths the surrounding area, presses gently. Not to eliminate the flaw, it cannot be undone, but to quiet it, to calm the surface, as one might smooth wrinkles from a bed before lying down. Then he resumes. The word is completed, the letter reformed with a subtle curve. The pinhole, now integrated into the shape, disappears into the body of the text. He makes a tiny mark in the margin, not a correction, merely a note, a scribe's record of what lies beneath the surface. No reader will know, no chant will falter, but the scribe remembers, because in the life of the parchment, even a pinhole matters. Debating whether to use a ligature or full form. The line has progressed smoothly, unbroken, uneventful. The letters lie where they should. The spacing is precise, the ink even, and now, as the scribe nears the midpoint of the sentence, his hand hesitates, not because of error nor fatigue, but due to a decision. Two letters, frequently joined, a familiar pair. He pauses. Should he use the ligature? It is a small matter. To the untrained eye, the difference is negligible, but to the scribe it is not merely a question of style. It is a question of fidelity, legibility, and perhaps most importantly, space. The word will just reach the margin, barely. If he writes each letter in full form, it may force the final stroke into the margin, an untidy outcome, a cramped impression, an invitation for the reader's eye to stumble, or for a fellow scribe to sigh in disapproval. But the ligature, ah yes, The two letters joined in a single sweep of the quill. Economical, elegant, a mark of practiced efficiency. And yet, it was not in the original. He glances to the exemplar. The reference text does not use the ligature. Each letter is distinct, clear, deliberate. There is no ambiguity in its formation. The scribe lowers his hand and lets it rest on the desk. He gazes at the word, half completed. The balance of the page depends on this choice, subtle as it is. He considers his options. To insert the ligature would preserve spacing, maintain flow, and allow the line to end just within the margin. It would not distort the meaning. It would not confuse the reader. In fact, it might be welcomed, but it would not mirror the exemplar, and that he knows carries weight. A scribe is not a writer. He does not innovate. He transmits. His task is to carry the voice of the text forward without altering its character, to replicate, not to revise. Still, allowances are made. Ligatures appear in other parts of the manuscript, some present in the original, some introduced by scribes like himself. Choices made not from vanity, but from necessity. He lifts the quill. His hand moves with slow purpose, and in the space where two letters would have stood apart, they now intertwine, joined in a ligature so modest that only a fellow scribe would recognize it. He continues the line. The margin is not broken. The word is whole, and the debate, now resolved, leaves no trace except in the mind of the man who settled it. Taking a short break to eat a cold piece of bread. The line ends, not abruptly, not dramatically, just a natural pause, marked by a period no larger than a grain of barley, placed exactly at the end of the sentence. The scribe leans back slightly, not to rest, not yet, but to glance ahead. The next section lies waiting, but there is time, enough to pause, enough to step briefly away from ink and quill. His hand, stiff from posture and repetition, reaches to the edge of the desk where a cloth bundle rests, folded thrice. It is not warm. It has not been since morning prayers, but it is food, simple, predictable. He unfolds the cloth. Inside, a single piece of bread, coarse, dense, made from barley and rye, dark in color and uneven at the edges. The crust is firm, the interior heavy with the grain left unmilled. No butter, no softening oil, just bread. It bears the chill of the room. It has absorbed the surrounding air. He breaks a piece off with quiet fingers. The crust resists slightly, crumbling at the edges. A few crumbs fall onto the desk. He brushes them aside with the side of his hand carefully, so they do not approach the ink or the still drying text. He lifts the bread to his mouth and takes a bite. The chewing is slow, not because the bread is difficult, though it is, but because haste is discouraged. Meals, even minor ones, are taken without excess. The bread is flavorless but familiar. It fills. That is its only task. His jaw works quietly, rhythmically. He does not read as he eats. He does not speak. He looks ahead at the next line, not with urgency, but with anticipation measured in bites. The room remains silent, only the faint creak of wood as he shifts slightly in his chair. The lamp flickers in the background. His eyes wander briefly to the window, where a patch of light, weak and gray, marks the hour. He takes another bite, smaller, then a third. The bread, though cold, warms slightly in the hand. The last crumb is placed in the mouth. The cloth is folded again, not refolded with ceremony, simply returned to its place with the same care one gives to all things in the scriptorium. He brushes his fingers clean against the hem of his robe and returns his hand to the desk. The break is over. It lasted no more than a minute. There is no marker for it in the manuscript, no record of pause. But the scribe knows, and the next letter will come slightly steadier, fueled not by inspiration but by grain. Watching dust motes drift in the window light. The desk is quiet. The ink has been set aside. A line has ended, and the next waits without urgency. The quill rests on a scrap of cloth, its point darkened, its duty momentarily suspended, and the scribe still upright, neither tense nor relaxed, lets his gaze drift away from the page. The window, narrow and high, offers no view. It was not built for scenery. Its purpose is light, and only light. Set deep into the thick stone wall, the small aperture admits a single shaft of morning sun. It angles downward, crossing the corner of the desk, illuminating the edge of the parchment with a pale, steady glow, and within that light, dust. Not thick, not swirling, just a few motes, slow, pale, nearly invisible unless caught at just the right moment. They move like thoughts not yet formed, drifting without aim, without haste, without concern for destination. The scribe watches. He does not shift his body, only his eyes follow the faint dance of the particles. Some rise, some fall, a few spin gently, caught in a current, too subtle to feel. Each mote glimmers, briefly, then disappears. Another follows, always another. There is no meaning in it, no message. It is simply the presence of air made visible. The room breathes, and the dust reveals its breath. He blinks slowly. This moment, like all others in the scriptorium, passes without notice. No bell will ring for it. No page will reflect it. But for a few heartbeats, the scribe is aware quietly, passively, that he exists within time, that the work will continue, that the ink will dry, that the sun will shift, and that everything in the room, from the quill to the dust to the stone walls themselves, is merely passing through its proper course. A mote lingers longer than the rest, suspended. Then it too drifts away. He turns back to the page. The line awaits, listening to the distant footsteps in the monastery hall. The quill has paused, though the ink remains fresh. The scribe leans slightly over the desk, not to write, but to listen. It is not a conscious act. His head does not turn, his ear does not tilt, but his awareness shifts, drawn gently from the parchment to the space beyond. Down the hall, beyond the thick wooden door of the scriptorium, along a corridor paved with uneven flagstones, there is movement, footsteps, soft, rhythmic, measured. They are not hurried nor loud. They do not interrupt, but announce themselves in the faintest series of taps, leather soles against stone, echoing with the irregular cadence of a slow, habitual gait. Perhaps it is Brother Arnulf returning from the garden. Perhaps Brother Clement headed to the chapter house. Perhaps no one at all. The halls, like time, carry sound without direction. The scribe does not strain to identify them. He simply listens. Each footfall is separated by a pause. The interval, always slightly longer than expected, stretches time thin. It is not the footstep itself that commands attention, but the space between them, those brief silences where nothing happens, yet something is felt. They draw closer, then pass. There is no knock, no greeting. The steps continue down the hall, then vanish around a corner, leaving only stillness behind. The absence of sound settles into place, as though it had been waiting to return. The scriptorium remains unchanged. The lamp flickers faintly. The ink reflects a dull sheen. The parchment lies patient beneath the scribe's hand. Yet the moment has passed through him, and with it, a small but perceptible shift. A reminder that life continues elsewhere, unseen, unheard, yet faintly present in its most minor vibrations. He blinks once, twice, then lowers the quill again. The next word begins not from inspiration, but from the quiet settling of space, rubbing a cramp from the writing hand. The line is near its end. The ink flows evenly, the strokes are consistent, the page nearly full. And yet, as the scribe lifts the quill to begin the next word, his fingers resist. The movement, once fluid, now stiffens. The knuckles tighten. The tendons in the hand draw taut. The index finger presses too hard. The thumb aches along the inside. The cramp announces itself not as a sharp pain, but as a deep and persistent fatigue, one bred of repetition, not exertion. He sets the quill down. Not with frustration, not abruptly, just gently. The point rests in the groove at the edge of the desk, still dark with ink. The scribe leans back just slightly and draws his right hand into his left, enveloping it in quiet attention. The fingers curl inward, then extend, curl again, a slow attempt at stretching, but the resistance remains. So he begins to rub. The pad of the left thumb presses into the muscle below the right thumb firmly, slowly, in tight little circles. The flesh is tense, knotted from hours of stillness masquerading as movement. His fingers, so accustomed to micro-motion, now resist even small shifts. He presses harder. The rubbing is not hurried. He moves from the base of the thumb to the center of the palm, then along the length of each finger in turn. The joints crack slightly, not loudly, just a faint sound like twigs flexing beneath a cloth. He pays special attention to the index finger, which bears the weight of the quill's control, and the middle finger, which supports it. The ache is familiar. It has visited him before in long copying sessions. In dimmer hours than this, he does not resent it. The cramp is not an enemy, it is a reminder. That flesh, unlike vellum, wears out more quickly. That hands, unlike quills, cannot be trimmed and dipped again when they falter. He pauses the massage and flexes the hand. The pain, while not gone, has receded. Dull now, not sharp. He shakes it once, lightly, letting gravity ease the tension. Then, with a practiced motion, he curls his fingers around the handle of the burnisher, not to smooth parchment, but to press it into the base of his palm, a rounded pressure, a deeper rub. When finished, he sets it aside. The quill is lifted again. The nib glistens faintly. The line waits, and though the ache still lingers, it is quiet now, manageable. It will return, of course, but for now the hand is ready again. The letters resume, repairing a loose binding thread on a codex. The codex rests near the edge of the desk, closed but familiar. Bound months ago, perhaps years, its pages bear the marks of time, not in dramatic fashion, but in the subtle warping of parchment, the fading of ink at the edges, the settling of dust along the spine. The leather cover, dark with oil and use, folds gently where fingers have pressed it open again and again. Today the scribe notices something different, not dramatic, not urgent, just a change. The lower edge of the spine has frayed. A single thread, once hidden in the gathering of the quires, now pokes free, looped and slack, catching faintly on the sleeve of his robe as he moves. It is not torn, not yet, but if left untended, it may unravel further, separating gatherings, loosening signatures, warping the symmetry of the book's form. He closes the codex slowly and lifts it, placing it carefully atop a folded cloth. Not for reverence, but to protect the cover from the rough grain of the desk. From a small drawer he retrieves the necessary tools, a bone folder, a length of linen thread, a curved needle, and a pair of iron shears no larger than his palm. He begins by inspecting the spine. The binding holes remain aligned. The cords are intact. The thread has worked loose not from failure but from friction. The gatherings, the sections of parchment folded and sewn, remain aligned. This is not a rebinding, only a repair. He threads the needle with care. The thread is waxed, pulled once through a block of beeswax to strengthen it and ensure smooth passage. He trims the end clean and begins the repair. The needle enters gently through the last gathering's outermost hole, already pierced, no need to force. He pulls the thread through, working it back along the original path. He follows the pattern laid down by the original binder, kettle stitches, one over each cord, locked in place with a modest knot hidden between the folds. Each stitch is slow, each pull deliberate. He watches the tension, not too tight lest the page buckle, not too loose lest the repair be meaningless. He completes the circuit, tucks the thread beneath the adjacent loop, and ties it with a quiet knot, not visible, not decorative, just functional. Then, with the bone folder, he presses the spine flat again, smoothing the cover over the repair. The codex is whole once more, not changed, not improved, simply preserved, made ready for the next handling, the next reading, the next silent passage across its well-thumbed pages. He places it gently on the shelf, upright, between two other volumes. No label is added, no note made, but the binding, quiet and firm, will hold. Staring blankly at the marginal notes from last week, The page before him is neither new nor freshly completed. It is from the previous gathering, set aside a few days ago but returned to now for reference. A narrow margin on the left bears his own additions written in smaller script, lighter ink, annotations, clarifications, perhaps a brief citation from another source, perhaps nothing more than a translation of a difficult phrase placed for convenience. He knows what they say. He remembers writing them. He recognizes the shape of his hand, the slight slant of the gi, the way he had compacted a long word into the narrow space without breaking the line, and yet he does not read them. He only stares. His eyes rest on the margin, not moving, not tracking the lines. His gaze drifts but without destination. The words are there but they do not speak. They do not invite understanding. They simply exist, printed faintly upon the parchment, and now mirrored without focus upon the surface of his mind. The lamp flickers behind him. He does not notice. A faint stiffness gathers in his neck. His hand rests on the desk, limp, holding the quill still, though he does not remember why he lifted it. Time passes, not much, perhaps a minute, perhaps more. The marginalia remains unchanged. A bird calls outside the narrow window, just once, faintly. The sound brings him back, not abruptly but slowly, as a leaf settles after drifting. His eyes narrow slightly, refocusing. The words regain their shape. The letters reassemble into phrases. The memory of their purpose stirs in the background. But the moment, blank, empty, neither restful nor troubling, has already passed. He blinks once, twice, straightens his back, adjusts his posture, and then lowers his eyes to the main text again. The marginal note will remain, now noticed but not reviewed, a relic of last week's thinking, now absorbed into the quiet rhythm of this one. Cleaning the quill tip with a scrap of wool. The line is finished. The ink flows no more, having thinned and congealed at the edges of the nib. The letters lie still, but the instrument, though light, though small, now carries the residue of labor. It is time to clean the quill. He does not hesitate, does not shift in his seat. He simply reaches toward the narrow shelf at the corner of the desk where a small bundle of wool lies folded in on itself, loosely tied with twine. The wool is not fine, not for garments. It is coarse, unevenly dyed, stiff in some places from earlier use, stained with faint rings of black and brown where ink once dried. He unwraps it slowly. Within the folds lies the cleanest portion, still soft, still fibrous. He takes up the quill, not by its shaft but delicately, near the nib, and draws it through the wool with the care of one polishing glass. The tip is rubbed gently, not scraped, not pressed. The goal is not to alter its shape but to remove what clings. The ink, having begun to dry in the narrow slit of the nib, must be lifted away. If left too long it will harden, interfering with flow, causing skips, stutters, unclean strokes. The wool's fibers catch the residue and draw it out, slowly, silently, without damaging the delicate cut of the quill's point. He turns it slightly and rubs again, back and forth, once along the broad side, again at the narrow edge. The wool absorbs the ink but also polishes the surface. His fingers feel the faint stickiness of the pigment before it lifts. The scent of iron and tannin, faint but present, rises slightly in the warm stillness. He examines the quill. The slit is clear. The tip shines slightly in the lamplight, not with gloss but with readiness. He tests it gently against the scrap parchment to the side. A single curve, a controlled dot. The ink freshly dipped flows again. Satisfied, he folds the wool back into its bundle. He does not wash it, does not replace it. Wool is durable. The stains are part of it now. He returns it to its place, where it will wait, unchanged, for the next pause in writing, and the quill returns to the page, renewed not by ceremony, but by maintenance, by this quiet ritual of friction and fiber. The next letter forms. Copying a psalm with extreme slowness. The page is fresh, the margins have been measured. The first lines have been ruled faintly with a lead stylus. The ink, stirred and tested, sits patiently in its horn cup, and before the scribe lies the source text, a psalter, well-worn, annotated by others before him, its letters slightly faded from age and use. Today's task: to copy a psalm. It is not a new psalm, not an unfamiliar one. He has read it dozens of times, perhaps more. It begins with a line that flows easily from memory, but memory is not enough. He must see. He must write. Slowly. He dips the quill, not deeply, only to the breadth of the nib's tip. He lifts, lets the excess drain, tests a line on the scrap parchment, then returns to the first ruled line on the new page. The first letter begins with an upward stroke, slow, measured. The angle of the quill must remain exact. The ink must not blot. The pressure must remain steady. He draws the letter with care, then the next, and the next. Each one formed with intention, not from haste, not from fluency, but from submission to rhythm. A single word may take nearly a minute to form. He does not look ahead more than 2 or 3 words. Each letter is a task, a shape, a moment to be performed fully before the next can begin. The psalm flows not in verse, but in increments. A sentence that once took 10 seconds to recite aloud will now take an hour to transcribe. This is not a failing, it is the work. The words are holy, that is understood, but their holiness lies not only in meaning, it lies in precision, in repetition, in slowness. To write too quickly is to misjudge a curve, to miss a ligature, to invite the trembling of a letter form. He writes with the slowness of ritual. Each stroke is watched, each completed word is reviewed, each line is measured against the one above it, ensuring consistency of height, spacing, pressure. When he reaches the end of the line, he does not move down immediately. He breathes, lets the ink dry slightly, then aligns the quill again to begin the descent to the next. There is no expectation that the psalm will be completed today or tomorrow. Even a short psalm, 20 lines perhaps, may take the better part of a week. He will return to it again and again, each session as slow as the last, each word rendered with equal deliberation. He will never finish a psalm quickly, nor should he, for the slowness is not merely part of the process, it is the process, and when the page is finally done, days from now, it will look no different than any other, but he will know, he will remember every stroke. Sneezing and smudging the margins slightly. The scriptorium is still. The air, faintly dry from the stored parchment and warmed gently by the oil lamps, carries a faint dustiness, the kind that clings to wool robes, to wooden shelves, to pages long turned. The scribe, hunched modestly over the lower half of a psalm, has not shifted position in many minutes. His eyes remain steady, his wrist supported lightly on the edge of the desk, the quill held just above the page, preparing to begin the next word. And then, a prickling at the edge of perception, the nose twitches, a faint dryness rises up through the nostrils, a breath hitches once, twice. There is no time for prevention, no warning. He sneezes, not loudly, not violently, but enough. A brief forward jerk of the shoulders, a quick expulsion of breath, caught in the crook of his sleeve. It is over in a second, but it is enough. When he returns to his posture, he notices immediately. The sleeve, though dry, brushed against the left margin, just beside the guiding line he had so carefully ruled earlier that morning. The smear is not large, not catastrophic, a faint gray streak, a small disturbance where sleeve met drying ink. He sighs, not audibly, but internally. He sets down the quill, his eyes scan the smudge. It is not a blot, the text remains untouched. The main body of the psalm lies pristine and unaffected, but the line in the margin, once neat and clear, now bears a soft arc, faint like the path of a snail across wet stone. He considers, should he attempt to erase it, scrape it lightly with a blade, perhaps, but the mark is faint enough that intervention might draw more attention than the flaw itself. A clean parchment surface rarely forgives the blemishes of correction. Better perhaps to let the mark remain, a witness not to error but to presence. After all, this manuscript will one day be read by others. None will know the cause of that soft distortion in the margin. They will wonder, perhaps, or perhaps not. The eyes are drawn to the text, not the borders, but the scribe will know. He rubs his nose with the back of his hand, takes a slow, deliberate breath, then repositions himself. The smudge is accepted, no longer resisted. It becomes part of the page, a silent testament to the scribe's body, the body that labors, tires, aches, and yes, even sneezes. He dips the quill again, the psalm resumes, and the smudge fades, not from sight but from thought, waiting for the ink to set fully before turning the page. The last line is done. The final letter curves into place with practiced restraint, a slight downward stroke, a pause, a dot, placed precisely, no flourish, no excess. The quill is lifted, the hand withdrawn, the work is momentarily complete, but it is not finished, because the ink, though dry to the eye, remains delicate. It glistens faintly where the nib released its heaviest burden. In places, especially the dark angular letters at the end of the psalm, it still rests atop the vellum's surface, not yet absorbed, not yet settled. The scribe knows this. He has seen what happens when haste gets the better of him. A palm dragging through fresh lines, a page turned too soon, ink transferred where it does not belong. None of it catastrophic, all of it avoidable. So he waits. There is no timer, no hourglass turned for such things. Only instinct, memory, the feel of the room's air. Today it is dry but not warm, still but not stagnant. A breeze would help, but none arrives. The window remains closed, the oil lamp burns low. He leans back slightly, not in idleness but in readiness. He watches the ink, not directly, for that is tiresome. His gaze softens. His eyes rest somewhere near the lower margin, observing not a particular word but the surface as a whole, waiting for the sheen to dull, for the darkness to flatten. That is the sign. Not a change in color, but a change in reflection, from glossy to matte. His hand remains on the desk, still. The quill rests between his fingers, not gripped, not aimed, just held, ready, but unmoving. Time passes, a minute, perhaps two. Nothing else occurs. There is no conversation, no bell, no footsteps in the corridor. The room contains only silence and paper and thought, and then the sheen fades. He tests one letter gently, just the tip of a dry finger brushing the corner of an R. No smear, no give. The ink has set. Only then does he reach for the lower corner of the parchment. With thumb and forefinger, he lifts the edge, slowly, very slowly, and folds it over, letting it fall gently onto the previous page. There is no sound. The vellum is firm, pliant, cool to the touch. The back of the page rests clean and untouched. The scribe adjusts the codex slightly, aligning the new blank surface beneath his rule lines. He dips the quill again, and begins the next line, stretching the neck while gazing at the ceiling. The desk has held him for hours, not firmly, not unkindly, but with the passive insistence of purpose. His shoulders have remained low, his elbows drawn in, the neck bent forward for line upon line, page upon page. Now begins to resist, not with pain but with the soft ache of constancy. The scribe sets the quill aside. It is not a dramatic gesture, no clatter, no sigh. He simply releases his grip and lays the tool across the cloth beside the inkhorn. His hand withdraws to his lap. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he tilts his head upward. First the chin rises, then the eyes follow. The muscles along the back of the neck, long held in a forward curve, begin to stretch. There is no cracking, no sudden shift, just the steady, gradual extension of a position long held in stasis. The ceiling of the scriptorium is plain. Beams of oak run across its breadth, darkened by smoke, dust, and age. The plaster between them is uneven, cracked in places, stained faintly with old candle soot. There is no decoration, no fresco, nothing to admire, and yet he looks, not to see but to gaze. to let the eyes lose focus, to feel the shift in posture, to release just for a moment the forward pull of the desk. The upward stretch does not reach the shoulders, it does not involve the back, it is only the neck, and the mind that briefly detaches from the surface of the page. The light from the high window slants across one beam. Dust has gathered there too. Small spider threads stretch from corner to corner. The scribe does not count them, he only notices, idly, like one watching the clouds without naming their shapes. He swallows. The throat moves. The tension recedes slightly. He tilts his head just a touch further, then lets it return slowly, downward, easing vertebra by vertebra back into its former curve. The stretch is over. It has lasted no more than 30 seconds, yet it brings a kind of reset. Not renewal, not rest, but a subtle recalibration of the body within its labor. He returns to his posture, picks up the quill again, and without any visible change resumes the work, listening to the low murmur of chanting from afar. The scriptorium is quiet. The scribe sits alone or nearly so, as is often the case during the mid-hours. His desk is lit by a single lamp, the light dim and steady, casting long, soft-edged shadows onto the vellum below. The air is still, save for the occasional shift of wood as he leans or the quiet settling of parchment under his hands. And then, from a distance, not loud, not sudden, comes a sound. It begins as little more than a vibration, a faint, nearly inaudible presence at the edge of hearing. Not a voice, not a word, just tone. A resonance, low and sustained, like the hum of wind along stone or the echo of water in a barrel. But gradually it takes shape. Voices, plural, layered but unified, male, as all voices here are, low in register, their edges blurred by distance, by corridor, by stone wall. They do not sing in performance, but in practice, in devotion. Chant. It comes from the chapel, not far, perhaps 2 or 3 halls away, down past the cloister walk, behind the carved wooden doors that separate the sacred from the mundane. The chant does not carry with clarity, it is not meant to, but in this silence every vibration travels. The stone absorbs none of it. It passes through doors, under beams, around shelves. The scribe pauses, not in writing, but in thought. His quill hovers just above the page, the last letter unfinished, the nib still wet. He does not shift, does not look up, he only listens. The chant is not loud, not insistent, it does not seek attention, it continues whether he hears it or not. But in this moment it has entered his space, and it fills it gently. The melody is plain chant, Gregorian, most likely, a sequence of rising and falling tones, joined at intervals, shaped by breath. The text is Latin, but the words do not reach him, only the contour of the music, a line, repeated, then varied, then joined in unison again. He knows the rhythm, he has chanted it himself. The voices blend not because they are identical, but because they are trained to surrender their individuality. There is no soloist, no emphasis, only the group, only tone, a slow measured procession of sound. It is not emotional, not stirring, but it is constant. The scribe breathes more deeply. The chant anchors him, not to a thought, not to a revelation, but to the hour, to the rhythm of the day. It tells him quietly where he is in time. This is the 6th hour chant, or perhaps it is the 9th. Either way, the sun has moved, the day has deepened, the ink is drying, the page is halfway done. He does not stop his work, but for a few moments more, he lets the sound accompany him. The letters return slowly to the page, and behind them, distant but present, flows the chant, a murmur, a presence, a steady thread of voices rising and falling without expectation of being heard. It continues long after the scribe forgets he is listening, reapplying a thin layer of beeswax to the desk surface. It is late in the day, the work has slowed, not from tiredness, but from the gradual tapering that occurs as the light begins to dim and the lamp becomes less reliable for fine tasks. The page before him is complete, or nearly so. He will not begin a new one now. Instead, he turns to another task, one quiet, practical, and as old as the desk itself. The desk, it is not ornate, a broad, angled surface of oak, seasoned by time and smoothed by contact. The wood holds the memory of 1,000 resting wrists, the scrape of knife and stylus, the slow drag of vellum sheets passed across it. It is not soft, but neither is it bare. For comfort, for care, and for the preservation of both parchment and hand, it must be treated, and so he retrieves the wax. It is stored in a small cloth pouch, tied loosely with thread, and kept at the back of the desk. When opened, it reveals a block of beeswax, light golden in color, rounded at the edges from use, faintly scented with the sweetness of its source. The surface is smooth, though slightly marked by the lines left from earlier polishings. He holds it in his palm for a moment, letting it warm. The warmth of the hand is not wasted. It softens the wax slightly, just enough to draw it across the wood without resistance. Then, with slow, practiced movements, he begins. The wax is drawn gently across the surface of the desk, not thickly. A thin layer is all that is needed. Too much, and the surface becomes sticky. Too little, and the wood drinks it in without change. He works in small circular motions, allowing the wax to distribute evenly, never pressing, never rushing. He begins at the top left, where his forearm most often rests, and moves steadily to the right, then down, across the lower edge where the parchment often drags. He avoids the groove where the quill lies, but lightly brushes the edge, keeping the finish smooth. Each motion is slow. There is no need for speed. The wax is not going anywhere. It responds to patience. Once the entire surface has been treated, he sets the block aside and takes up a clean scrap of linen kept only for this purpose. He buffs the wax, gently at first, then with slightly more pressure. The cloth draws out the shine, not of gloss but of softness. The wood does not gleam. It glows. He breathes in the faint scent. Wax, wood, oil, time. The desk is ready again, not transformed, not renewed, but preserved. This small act will not be noticed by others, but it will be felt, in the smooth passage of a quill across the surface, in the absence of friction where a sleeve slides gently across the grain, in the quiet continuity of a workspace maintained not for comfort, but for constancy. He folds the cloth, wraps the wax, returns them to their place. The desk is silent, still, and now just slightly more itself. Sharpening the quill against a small piece of pumice, the script begins to falter, not from the scribe's hand, nor from fatigue, but from the tool itself. The strokes, once narrow and clean, begin to spread slightly. Curves grow heavy, serifs dull. The edge of the quill has softened, its fine slit no longer exact, its tip beginning to fray. The letters lose their crispness, their discipline. The page, though not yet affected in meaning, begins to drift in form. He sets down the quill, not in frustration, only in recognition. It is time. From a narrow box in the desk's drawer, he withdraws a small cloth-wrapped bundle. It contains his shaping tools, a penknife, a linen wiper, and at its heart, a thumb-sized stone. Light gray, rough to the touch, pumice. Not all scribes prefer pumice. Some use fine sand, others a dry whetstone. But pumice, light and porous, provides both abrasion and softness, just enough to draw, not to cut. He places it on a flat scrap of wood beside his desk. The quill, held lightly between his thumb and index finger, is examined first. He turns it slowly. The tip, once triangular and sharp, now shows the faintest split where pressure and ink have done their quiet work. He cleans it first, drawing it gently through a piece of soft wool to remove any residue of ink. Then, with the edge of his penknife, he trims it lightly, no more than a shaving, a feather's thickness, to restore its form. Now comes the pumice. He holds the quill at an angle, low, steady, not too steep. Then, slowly, carefully, he draws it along the surface of the pumice. One pass, then another, always in one direction, never back and forth. The goal is not to wear it down quickly, but to shape it gradually, preserving the integrity of the slit, maintaining the symmetry of the tip. He listens. The sound is faint, a dry whisper as quill meets stone, a scratch, not unpleasant, like the brushing of reeds against a wall. He pauses after each pass, inspects the tip, tests it against the light. He may touch it once against his thumb, feeling for smoothness, not sharpness, but balance. He trims again, a tiny paring, no more than a thread's width, then back to the pumice. This process continues for several minutes, quiet, focused. The world narrows to this point, the alignment of edge, the discipline of the angle, the feel of drag across stone. When he judges it ready, he tests it, not on the manuscript, never on the true page, but on a scrap of vellum kept nearby for just this purpose. A stroke downward, then a loop, then a horizontal line. The ink flows again, clean, controlled. The tip bites slightly into the surface without tearing. He nods to no one, satisfied. The pumice is wrapped, the knife returned, the quill set momentarily aside as he prepares the next page. It is a task done countless times, but never in haste, for a quill is not a pen. It does not endure. It must be managed, refined, maintained. In this way, the scribe's hand and tool remain in harmony. The work resumes, copying the abbreviated words in the correct form. The scribe sits in near silence. His page is half filled. The lines align with the ruled guides. The ink flows steadily. But now he encounters a word, half familiar, half formed. In the exemplar it is shortened, not written fully, but marked by a line above, a flourish, a symbol, an abbreviation. He knows this one. He has seen it many times before. Dominus, the Lord. But here, in the model text, it is abbreviated, written as DNS with a tilde above the N to signify omission. The letters are sparse, the meaning full. It is one of many such abbreviations common to Latin texts copied for centuries. Sacred words, often repeated, condensed to save time, space, and ink. Yet it is not his task to interpret it. It is his task to reproduce it exactly. He pauses. The decision is not automatic. In some contexts, the abbreviation is retained. In others, it is expanded. The choice depends on the intended audience, the custom of the scriptorium, the purpose of the manuscript. Today he will retain it. He lowers the quill and begins. The D is formed first, broad and rounded, its stem drawn with deliberate care. Then the N compact, slightly narrower than in the full word. He leaves space above. The S is added last, looping quietly inward. Then, with the same ink and a careful motion, he draws the tilde, light, almost floating, like a breeze across still water, a mark not of flourish but of contraction. He checks it. It matches the original, nearly identical. The word stands, shortened but complete in meaning. He continues. More follow. Isis, for Isis, XPi for Christi, QD for Quad. These are known to him, not just as symbols but as habits of the text, woven into the scriptoria's long memory. He does not question them. He does not seek to modernize. He transmits. Each abbreviation demands control. The strokes must remain clear, even though the letters are few. Misplacing a tilde, drawing a loop too high, leaving too wide a gap, any of these errors would confuse the reader. The scribe knows that abbreviations must be more precise than full words, for they do not explain themselves, and so he works slowly. He reads the exemplar carefully. He matches each abbreviated form to the one he has seen before. In moments of uncertainty, he consults the marginal notes or the glossary kept at the edge of the scriptorium shelf, not because he does not know, but because even known things must be checked. The abbreviations pile up, but the page remains neat. Each shortened word rests within the line, measured, proportional, modest. No decoration, no excess, only efficiency clothed in uniformity. He reaches the bottom of the column. He leans back only slightly and begins the next. Flipping back to cross-check a spelling from Chapter 1, the work proceeds. The page before him is nearly full. The ink flows well, the letters remain aligned. But a word now halfway copied causes him to pause. He has seen this word before, in Chapter 1 weeks ago, or perhaps longer. It lies many gatherings back. The term is unusual, slightly foreign in structure, perhaps a name, perhaps a theological phrase borrowed from Greek or early Latin. He recalls hesitating over it the first time. Now it appears again, but it looks slightly different. In this instance, he is unsure. A single letter's presence or absence might go unnoticed by the inattentive reader, but not by a scribe, so he stops. The quill is placed gently onto the cloth at the edge of the desk. The inkhorn remains still. His left hand reaches for the bound pages, already thick from weeks of steady work, and lifts the most recent gathering with care. The parchment, slightly curled at the edge, resists just faintly. The pages are heavy. They do not flutter. They must be moved slowly, each one lifted and turned in deliberate sequence. He flips back. Page after page passes beneath his hand, each one familiar, each line his own. He does not skim. He knows roughly where the word lies. Not at the very beginning, but near the bottom of a right-hand page in the first section, perhaps 3 quires in. There, he finds it. The word appears, clear and whole. The spelling is precise. The original instance confirms what he suspected. A letter in the middle, present then, missing now. He studies the form. His earlier hand was firmer, perhaps more confident. The E that now feels optional had been written clearly in the first instance. He runs his finger just beneath the line, not touching the ink, just feeling the grooves pressed into the parchment by his own hand. There is no marginal correction, no alternate form offered. This then is the preferred spelling. He nods. He does not mark the page. He does not leave a sign. He simply notes it in memory, lets the page fall back into place, and turns slowly forward through the gatherings again, each one slightly more familiar as it returns beneath his hand, back to the present page. The quill is lifted once more. The ink, now slightly thicker from resting, is stirred again with the nib. He adjusts the word, adds the missing letter. The line resumes. The moment will pass unnoticed by any reader, but for the scribe, it is a mark of discipline, of care, of the unrecorded labor that ensures the text will carry not just words but correctness, and the manuscript remains consistent. Scribbling a tiny correction between 2 lines. It begins with a glance. The scribe, midway through a passage, reads back not for content but for form. His eyes trace the line just completed. The letters are clean, evenly spaced. The ink has settled without blot, but something stands out, not at first, but on the second pass he sees it. A letter is missing, a single one, small, non-essential to the meaning perhaps, but essential to the word's full shape. A vowel, likely, perhaps an E or an I, not emphasized but expected. Its absence disturbs the rhythm of the script. The word appears slightly off balance, too narrow. Its ligature stretches too far. He pauses. This is not a matter for scraping. The parchment is fine, but already worked. The ink, though fresh, has begun to bind with the fibers. Scraping would damage the surface, leave a faint scar, a shimmer in the vellum that future readers would notice. And so he considers. There is space, not much, but enough. A narrow corridor of whiteness lies between the completed line and the one above it. Not intentionally left, but always there. The natural gap of the ruled lines, meant for breath, not for amendment. He makes the choice. He lifts the quill. Carefully, with the lightest stroke he begins to form the missing letter, no larger than necessary, its tail abbreviated, its curve shallow. He fits it precisely between the 2 lines, leaning it slightly upward so that it aligns with the flow of the surrounding word. There is no room for flourish. This is not a decorative addition. It is a repair, a patch woven with ink, not thread. He writes it with just enough clarity to be read, just enough faintness to be understood as a correction. It is not centered. It floats, slightly off to the side, nestled between the letters above and below like a whispered word between speakers in a silent hall. Then he draws a tiny care. No flourish, just a mark. A small upward flick beneath the line, pointing gently to where the letter belongs. Not obtrusive, not insistent, but there like a finger indicating direction without speaking. He leans back, examines it. The eye registers it, but it does not interrupt. That is the goal. He knows other scribes might have handled it differently. Some would have scraped, some would have left it. But for him, this correction, brief, quiet, unannounced, is the ideal solution. Honest, modest, effective. He continues. The line resumes. The words flow on. The page remains whole. And the correction, tiny, careful, unremarkable, joins the manuscript as both flaw and fidelity. Noting the change in light as afternoon wears on, the scribe does not mark the hour with a clock. There are bells, of course, rung for prayer, for meals, for matins and vespers and all the hours between, but in the stillness of the scriptorium, it is the light that tells him where he stands in the day, and now it changes. It is not sudden, it never is, but gradually the white of the parchment takes on a warmer hue. The pale blue daylight that streamed through the high narrow window has shifted. Its edge grows softer. The beam that once cut sharply across the writing desk now stretches longer, thinner, more golden. He does not look directly at the window. Instead, he watches the page. The light falls differently now. The shadows cast by the edges of letters are no longer directly below them, but lean subtly to the side. The ink glints just slightly more. The warmth of the hue hints at the sun's angle, no longer overhead but sliding gently across the sky toward its rest. The scribe pauses, not from fatigue but from quiet notice. He knows this moment. It returns each day in its own way. The room becomes quieter, though it was silent before. The walls feel closer. The corners of the scriptorium darken first, those spaces furthest from the window where light withdraws gently like a tide. He adjusts the position of the codex, not much, just enough to catch the sun's angle for a little longer. He shifts the inkhorn slightly, to avoid its shadow falling across the margin. These are practiced movements, requiring no thought. His body knows the rhythm of light better than the bells. Outside the air cools. Though he cannot see it, he can feel it, a faint draft through the stone, a change in the breath of the room. His sleeves, once rolled slightly at the wrist, now cover his arms again. The light continues to fade. It is not yet evening, not yet time to stop, but the shift is undeniable. The world leans toward dusk, and the scriptorium responds, not with haste, not with alarm, but with a simple adjustment. He dips the quill again. The parchment beneath his hand has changed color, ever so slightly, and still the letters continue. Repeating a decorative initial letter for the third time, the scribe has reached the beginning of a new passage. It is not a new chapter, not a new psalm, but a shift within the text, a moment worthy of emphasis however subtle. The tradition is clear. The initial letter shall be drawn larger, more ornate. It need not be lavish. There is no gilding, no illumination, only ink. But its size, its flourish, its distinctiveness must mark the reader's eye, and so he begins. The first attempt is careful, but something falters. A slight tremor in the curve, perhaps, an imbalance in the spacing between strokes. The letter, an S, broad and looping, leans too far to the right. It crowds the margin, not unusable, but imprecise. He scrapes it, slowly. With a fine blade, the surface of the parchment is shaved, not dug, not gouged, just a gentle lifting of the ink, and a thin layer of vellum beneath. A faint powder rises. He brushes it aside, waits, then he tries again. This second attempt begins better. The base stroke is strong, the loop curves smoothly, but the tail meant to curl inward extends too long. It drifts dangerously close to the line of text beneath. The balance is lost. He stops. Again the blade is taken up. Again the letter is removed. And now the surface is thinner, fragile. This will be the last attempt in this spot. Another failure will require a shift down the line or to the opposite margin. But he prefers not to shift. The alignment would be altered. The visual rhythm of the page would be disturbed. He breathes. The third attempt begins. The quill, now sharpened and steady, dips into the ink. The letter begins with a central stroke, bold, upright. Then the upper curve, drawn slowly, shaped not in haste but with deliberate restraint. It rounds inward perfectly, not too tight, not too broad. He pauses, then completes the lower curve. This time, the tail curls inward at just the right height, ending in a neat, tight finish that echoes the opening stroke. The proportions hold. The letter rests firmly on the line, neither floating nor sinking. He lets it sit. No additions, no excess. The decoration is minimal, a single dot placed in the curl, a tiny flick at the top, nothing more. This is not illumination, it is emphasis, and now it is complete. The scribe leans back slightly. He examines the whole. The scraped area shows faintly, but the ink covers it cleanly. The texture of the letter, slightly thicker than the rest, casts a gentle shadow in the angled light. It stands out, not brightly, but firmly, as it should. He moves on. The text resumes. The next line flows beneath the letter, obedient to its placement. No gap remains. But for the scribe, this single letter carries the memory of 3 attempts, 2 removals, and a small victory of form reclaimed through patient craft. Setting aside the day's work to dry overnight, the final stroke is made. A loop, a tail, a closing line. The scribe lifts his quill slowly, mindful of the ink still glistening at its point. He does not exhale deeply. He does not stretch. He simply pauses. His hand remains suspended, then descends to place the quill gently upon the narrow ledge at the back of the desk. The parchment before him is complete, for today at least. 3 full lines, perhaps 4, remain damp. He can see it in the way the ink reflects the dimming lamplight. Certain letters, B, D, O, hold more ink in their bowls. In the ascenders and descenders, the ink thickens minutely, creating subtle ridges. The scribe knows their behavior. He knows they require time, time without touch. He reaches for a small knife, not to scrape, but to lift. With the flat edge, he slides beneath the bottom right corner of the page. The vellum, though pliant, resists sudden bending. The angle must be right. The parchment must move gently like cloth, but more slowly, like hide remembering its former shape. He lifts the sheet, not fully, just enough to place a narrow rod beneath it, a strip of polished wood, perhaps, or a rolled piece of linen. This raises the sheet above the desk's surface, allowing air to pass beneath. Ink dries not only from above, but through exposure to the stillness of space. Next he reaches for a board, smooth, thin, lined faintly on one side from years of use. It is placed over the entire page, not to press but to protect. A dust shield, a gesture of respect. The board ensures that no falling ash, no errant hand, no flick of the robe will disturb the work overnight. He aligns it carefully. Then, if the work is part of a codex in progress, he closes the binding gently. If not, the single sheet is set upon the rack nearby, joined with others, each resting under similar boards, each marked with a tiny tab of parchment to indicate order. He extinguishes the lamp, not with a puff but with a snuffer. A cone of metal lowers, cuts off the flame's breath. The wick smolders faintly, then dies. The scent of warm oil lingers in the air, mixing with that of hide, ink, and wool. He brushes his hands lightly, more from habit than need. The day is done. The room, now quiet, receives the manuscript in its most vulnerable state, not wet, but not yet permanent. The ink will continue to bind overnight, forming itself more deeply into the fibers. In the morning he will return, examine the edges, perhaps burnish the margins with a smooth stone, but for now he walks away. The parchment rests, the page is safe, and time continues its work in silence. Carefully closing the manuscript with a cloth wrap, the day's work has ended. The final page lies protected beneath its drying board, or if complete, rests quietly between its companions within the binding. But whether codex or folio, the manuscript cannot be left bare. The scribe knows this. Exposure, even in a clean scriptorium, invites harm. Dust may settle, parchment may warp, ink may fade, ever so slightly, under the touch of air. So now he wraps. The cloth lies folded beside the desk, its folds faintly creased from long storage. It is not embroidered, not dyed. Plain linen, off-white, slightly yellowed at the edges. It is soft, not the coarseness of work garments, but fine woven, chosen precisely for its gentleness. He takes it in both hands. The cloth is unfolded with care, slowly, one corner at a time. It makes no sound, only the soft sigh of fabric separating from itself. He lays it out over the desk, brushing it once with his palm to smooth the creases. Then he lifts the manuscript, two hands, one beneath, one steadying from the side. The codex is not heavy, but its weight is deliberate. The pages shift minutely within the binding, like breathing. He places it at the center of the cloth, aligning the spine parallel with the table's edge. The wrapping begins. First, the left side of the cloth is folded inward, gently but with enough tension to embrace the edges of the binding. Then the right. The cloth overlaps, covering the manuscript like a blanket drawn to the chin. Then the top is folded down, a faint pressure, just enough to keep the cover pressed lightly shut. Finally, the bottom fold comes up and over. He tucks it in, not tightly, only firmly enough to stay in place. If the cloth has ties sewn into the corners, as some do, he pulls them together and knots them once, then again, a simple knot, not a bow, not meant to adorn, only to secure. If there are no ties, the tuck will hold. He knows how to wrap it so. He lifts it once more, just briefly, to ensure that the corners are protected, that the edges do not shift. A gentle shake confirms the wrap is firm. No sound comes from within. The manuscript, wrapped now in linen, is held, not imprisoned, not displayed, but cared for. He places it on the shelf, not vertically, not in stacks, horizontally, with the spine outward. A label, if any, is visible on the outside of the cloth, a simple slip of parchment tied to one end, bearing a line or two of script in his own hand. Nothing more than the title, sometimes not even that. The manuscript rests, not cold, not warm, protected. Its contents, lines, letters, ornaments, abbreviations, corrections, now hidden, invisible beneath linen, but they remain, secure. Tomorrow they may be read again, or added to, or simply turned through, but for now they are still, and the scribe, his hands finally idle, returns the cloth's companion to its drawer and steps away. Cleaning the writing tools with quiet reverence, the scribe's work has ceased. The page is complete, the manuscript wrapped. The light has dimmed, but before the bench is left, before the lamp is fully extinguished, and the door to the scriptorium closed for the night, there remains one final sacred duty, the tending of the tools. They are few, a quill or two, no more, a penknife, a whetstone or piece of pumice, a strip of wool, the horn cup of ink now half full, its contents dark and still, and perhaps a scrap of linen folded twice, resting on the ledge of the desk like a napkin awaiting its final use. He begins with the quill. He lifts it gently, not gripping but supporting. The shaft is light, the nib slightly stained from the day's ink but unblotted. He brings it to the wool cloth, where he draws it through, back and forth with slow repetition. The nib is cleared of residue. If any ink has dried in the slit, he moistens a corner of the wool, not with water, but with the faintest touch of breath, and wipes again carefully, so as not to soften or swell the cut. He inspects the tip, still sharp, still true. It will serve another day. He sets it aside, resting it inside a small wooden case cushioned with flax fibers to keep it from warping. Then the knife. It is not soiled, but he wipes it nonetheless, removing any trace of dust or moisture. The blade is folded, or if not, the edge is laid flat in its sheath. It has not dulled today. No need to hone it, but he runs a thumb lightly along its back, not the edge, to sense its readiness. The inkhorn is next. He does not pour it out. The ink will keep, provided the horn is sealed, but he wipes the rim. Ink crusts there. Eventually, it dries to a ring, with a bit of linen, dampened slightly with water. He cleans the edge inside and out. Then he seals it with its fitted lid, a disc of waxed wood or leather, tied or pressed to fit. The desk is brushed, not with a broom but with a folded cloth. The scraps of parchment are gathered. The wool is shaken gently outside the window if weather permits. The linen is folded once more, the stains upon it now part of its identity. All is returned to its place. There is no box marked tools. There is no chest with hinges. Only small drawers, small shelves, each known to him alone. The quills go here, the knife here, the cloths there. Each item laid down with the quiet attention one gives to familiar things at day's end. He does not speak. No words are needed. The reverence is not ceremonial. It is habitual, lived, repeated every day, without variation, without performance. The tools served him, and now he serves them by cleaning, by preserving, by respecting their part in the long, unbroken line of written thought. The lamp is the last to go. He snuffs it gently. The room settles into twilight, and the tools, silent, wrapped, sheathed, dried, wait patiently for morning. Retiring to a plain bed with stiff sheets and cold feet, the scriptorium is dark. The tools are cleaned, the manuscript wrapped, the lamp snuffed. The corridor beyond is quiet, lined with heavy stone, the air now tinged with the chill of approaching night. His sandals make no sound on the worn flagstones as he walks. There are no conversations, no songs. The hour permits none. He arrives at the dormitory, a long narrow hall with rows of simple beds, each one like the next. No decoration, no ownership, no curtain, no ornament, just a wooden frame slightly bowed from years of weight, a straw-filled mattress and a coarse linen sheet. He finds his place. It is not marked, but he knows it. He kneels first, his hands resting on the woolen robe folded neatly at the end of the bed. A brief prayer, silent, not rushed, passes through him, not spoken, not offered, merely acknowledged. Then, slowly, he prepares to lie down. The blanket is lifted. It is thin, the weave tight but unyielding. Beneath it lies the sheet, linen, untreated, washed with lye and sun-dried until rigid. It creaks faintly as he smooths it. There is no feather pillow, only a folded cloth sack filled with hay or wool, wrapped again in linen. He removes his sandals. Then he draws the robe over his thin tunic and sits on the edge of the bed. The straw mattress gives slightly, not soft, never soft, but even its resistance has become familiar. He swings his legs up and over, positioning himself beneath the blanket. He pulls the sheet up to his chest. The linen touches his skin. It is cold, not sharply so, but penetrating. The kind of chill that does not bite, but lingers, settles. The fabric, never truly warmed by the body alone, keeps its edge throughout the night. He feels it most in his feet. They are bare. The toes curl slightly, not in pain but in response. He does not rub them. He does not shift. He simply lies still, allowing the chill to settle into him. Acceptance, not resistance, is the night's rule. The blanket is drawn just beneath his chin. It smells faintly of soap, of wood smoke, and the faint must of damp stone. These are not unpleasant scents. They are the sense of sleep, of rest without comfort, of stillness without indulgence. He lies flat. There is no adjustment. The bed does not allow for it. His arms rest at his sides. His eyes remain open a while longer, adjusting to the darkness, tracing the dim beams overhead, listening for the quiet, familiar sounds of others nearby, the faint rustle of cloth, the creak of wood, the occasional sigh. Eventually, even these fade. The cold does not leave. It only becomes less important. The sheets, still stiff, wrap around him with a silence deeper than that of the scriptorium, a silence that asks nothing, demands nothing, only stillness. Sleep will come, not quickly, not warmly, but slowly, as the body yields to the quiet, as the feet remain cold, and as the page of the day, now fully turned, rests unwritten, unwrit, complete. Waking before dawn to the sound of the monastery bell. Before the sun has risen, the sound arrives. It is not loud, not jarring. A deep tone, resonant and deliberate, passes through the cold stone walls like water through cloth. It is the monastery bell, rung slowly with pauses between strikes. the signal not for alarm, nor for joy, but for prayer, for the beginning of day. The scribe does not startle, he wakes without protest, the sound familiar, expected. Eyes open into darkness. The dormitory remains dim. A faint light from a low window may appear in time, but not yet. The bell tolls again. He does not rush to rise, instead he listens. The tone fades, then returns. 3 times, then silence. Only then does he move. He pushes back the stiff sheet, careful not to disturb the blanket's fold. The chill of the room meets him again, first at the neck, then across the arms. He sits up slowly. The robe folded near the head of the bed is reached for without sight. The wool is coarse but familiar. He stands. Feet touch the cold stone floor. There is no fire, no rug, only the raw honesty of mourning. He dresses with slow efficiency. Robe first, then belt, then sandals. No mirror, no water. Cleanliness was tended to before the last light of the prior day. Morning now is for stillness. He joins the line. Others wake too, quietly, one by one. No words are exchanged. Only the creak of beds, the brushing of cloth. Each man moves at the same pace, toward the chapel, toward the psalms, toward the rhythm of another day. The scriptorium awaits, but not yet. First the voice must rise before the pen may return. Entering the chapel for morning prayer. The corridor is cool. The stone walls carry the night's air. Moisture clings faintly to the joints where mortar meets rock. The sandals of the monks press softly against the flagstones, each step echoing only faintly in the narrow passage. No one speaks. There is no need. The scribe walks near the back of the small procession, not out of shame nor pride, but simply habit. His robe brushes gently against his legs. The hood, for now, remains down. His hands are folded loosely in front of him, not clasped, but held with fingers overlapping in a modest pose of readiness. They pass beneath the archway. The chapel door stands open. Heavy oak-planked, iron-bound, it creaks just slightly as the last few brothers enter. The hinges, rubbed with wax and oil, never swing freely but resist with a slow gravity, as though reminded of the weight of their purpose. Within, the air is different, still cool, but more contained. The stone here does not breathe, it absorbs. The scent is of old wood, candle wax, a hint of incense that lingers despite none being lit. The altar lies ahead, modest, undecorated. 2 candles burn, one on either side, their flames steady, offering the first light the scribe sees today. He walks to his place. The benches are unadorned, worn smooth by habit, not design. Each monk knows where to stand, not by designation, but by rhythm. The scribe takes his place, third from the left, near the column where the morning sun will one day fall, though not yet. The bell outside stops. There is a pause. Then a voice begins. Not loud, not individual, a chant, monotone, slow, unadorned. The opening line of a psalm. It rolls gently, passed from one brother to the next. The tones are matched by memory, not ear. The Latin is clear, not sung but recited, lifted slightly above speech. The scribe joins in. His voice is neither strong nor weak. It blends. That is all that is required. No inflection, no emphasis, only presence. The words pass. Domini, labia mea appares, et os meum annuntiabit laudem tuum. The candlelight flickers. A bird outside stirs. Not visible, not near, but audible in a break between psalms. The world beyond the chapel begins to wake, but slowly, and far off. Here, time holds steady. The pace does not change. A second psalm begins. There is no signal, only movement. The voices shift, resume. Hands remain still. Feet are unmoving. The body is present, but offered without assertion. Only the lips move, and after a time, neither long nor short, the final verse is said. The scribe bows his head. The service is not ended with ceremony. No closing bell, no declaration, only a pause, and the soft movement of sandals on stone as the brothers return to their day. The chapel empties. The scribe is among the last to leave, not lingering, only slow. He breathes the cool air again as he steps into the corridor. The light has changed, not bright, but different. A gray-blue seep of dawn touches the floor. The scriptorium awaits. He will walk there soon. Entering the scriptorium, while the ink warms slightly, the corridor bends. A familiar turn, the same archway passed through each morning. The stones bear marks of centuries, though none are counted. The door to the scriptorium is closed, not locked, only held fast against the night's draft. The iron latch is cold to the touch, but it lifts easily. The scriptorium opens before him, dim, silent, empty, save for the breath of the space itself. The scent of old parchment and wax returns at once. The scribe steps inside. His feet press gently against the floor. Wood here, not stone. Each board rests slightly uneven, worn smoother in the middle where paths have formed over time. The windows, narrow and set high in the wall, admit the faintest blue of morning light, not enough to work by, but enough to see. He does not light the lamp yet. He will wait. He always waits. He moves to his desk, the same one, always the same. Near the corner beside the wall where the draft is least and the light, when it comes, is longest held. The desk is just as he left it. The cloth still draped, the writing board placed gently atop the manuscript which rests wrapped beneath. Nothing disturbed, nothing moved. He removes the board first, laying it flat beside the desk. Then he peels back the cloth. Slowly, the folds yield with a soft sound, fabric brushing over fabric. The manuscript is untouched. The page completed the day before shows no warping, no stain. The ink has dried. He checks it with a glance. The letter forms hold, no spread, no fade. He turns the page. Beneath it, the next blank folio waits. He lays it flat. The surface is cool, smooth. It gives slightly at the touch, but resists the drag of a dry finger. He does not write yet. He does not even lift the quill. Instead, he attends to the ink. It rests in its horn cup, near the back of the desk. A simple container, polished and blackened from handling. The ink within it is dark, thick, and silent. Overnight it cools. The iron gall ink, made of oak galls and vitriol, sits heavy at the bottom. Above it a thinner layer may form, a sheen that must be stirred. He lifts the cup. The bottom is gently swirled, not shaken. He does not want bubbles, only motion. The ink must warm, not in temperature, but in texture. Cold ink flows sluggishly. It clings to the nib. It blots without warning. Warmed, it moves. He sets the horn down. He waits. During this pause he may adjust the writing desk's angle. A small wedge beneath the rear edge corrects the slant. He checks the quill, resting in its groove. Its tip, shaped the day before, needs no sharpening, only a brief stroke against wool to clear dust. Outside, the light grows stronger. Still no sunbeam, but the blue turns gray, then pearled. Soon the desk will catch the window's favor. The lamp remains unlit. Ink does not like flame. He places his hand near the horn, not to warm it, but to judge it. The ink has shifted. Its top layer darkens again. The consistency stirs more easily. It is ready. Only now does he lift the quill. The work will begin. The first line awaits. Before you start, check the time. Just keep that in mind, because you might not be awake long enough to see the end of this video. I made this for you, yes you, wherever you are, whatever you're carrying tonight. So if this calms you down a little, tap the like button before your eyes get heavy, subscribe, and this quiet place will just be here whenever you need it. Tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, turn on a soft fan, and settle in. You're going to bed tonight in 1325. The floor is wet, your bed is made of straw, and the breakfast bell outside isn't ringing. Let's get started.